The NBA returns tonight. Still have to wait a little bit for the Sacramento Kings, but we do have NBA basketball this evening. Thursday, though, is Kings and Minnesota Timberwolves opening night of the season. And to preview that game and break down the matchup, Damien Barling from ESPN 1320's D-Lo and KC joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and opening night of the NBA season, even if the Kings aren't playing, basketball returning, it turns me into a kid again. I love this game. I love this sport so freaking much. And there is extra reason to watch tonight's action from the Sacramento Kings perspective, because tonight is the season opener for the Kings' opponent on Thursday night, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're taking on the Los Angeles Lakers. Normally, we actively root against the Lakers anyway. Now we're actively rooting against the Lakers because I don't know about you, I don't want the Kings to take on a pissed off 0-1 Timberwolves team on Thursday. I have a hard time believing the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to start their season 0-2, but hey, you never know. Damien Barling, my good friend from ESPN 1320's D-Lo and KC, he's going to join me on today's podcast. We're going to have an extensive preview focusing on Kings and Timberwolves, what the Kings need to do to win that game. And as you can see and tell by the title of this podcast, one of the main questions and things we're going to discuss is who guards Anthony Edwards. So that question is not just for Damien and myself to discuss. We want to hear from you. Who do you have starting against Anthony Edwards on defense on Thursday night? Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, De'Aaron Fox, somebody else? Let us know. You can reach me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Looking forward to hearing your responses on that. Also, the Locked On Kings newsletter is live. This is day 2. Yeah, day 2 of the newsletter. So if you haven't signed up yet, there will be a link in the description, a link in the comment section as well. Newsletters.lockedon.com. I'm pretty sure that's correct. Let me double check one more time. Again, that you'll find, newsletters.lockedonpodcasts.com. That's where you go. Again, the link will be in the description for you to check out, and hopefully go and subscribe and get daily Kings and NBA content in a newsletter form delivered right to your email, and it's completely free. Again, we are trying to beat the Los Angeles Lakers and the Locked On Lakers podcast in subscriptions in the first month of this of this newsletter's existence. Plus, I am going to have a fun little giveaway involving the newsletter in the very near future. So keep an eye and an ear out for that. But for now, please enjoy my Kings and T-Wolves preview with Damien Barling. We're all excited for opening night inside of the Golden One Center. Sacramento Kings, Minnesota Timberwolves, still a couple days away, but we're getting closer and closer. And we're excited to break down this matchup with D-Lo and KC on ESPN 1320. Damien Barling back here with me on Locked On Kings. D-Lo, it's probably completely irrational, which you knowing me knows that I can tend to go down the irrational route. But the T-Wolves open up their season tonight against the Los Angeles Lakers. I am of the belief that if somehow the Lakers beat the Timberwolves tonight, the Sacramento Kings will get a pissed off version of Minnesota on Thursday. I'm already actively rooting against the Lakers every chance I get. I'm really rooting against the Lakers tonight. I don't want a pissed off version, an 0-1 version of Minnesota on Thursday night.
No, I understand that. Like, I understand the idea. You don't want a team, with high expectations coming into the Golden One Center on a loss. Like, I completely get that line of thinking. In Minnesota, I do kind of wonder about, like, what exactly, like Karl-Anthony Towns was a big part of what they do.
Right.
There's going to be a bit of an adjustment with Julius Randle. He's a different type of player. Now, obviously, Minnesota sees that as a better fit for them, and they've added Dante DiVincenzo and all that. So it'll be interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to watch them play tonight. I think it'll be interesting to watch them play Thursday. But I promise you, I completely understand your line of thinking.
Am I crazy that I think the DiVincenzo pickup is better for Minnesota than the Julius Randle pickup? And I'm not trying to disrespect Julius, because you and I kind of been on team Julius Randle, and the idea of him coming to Sacramento over the years makes no sense now. But Dante DiVincenzo was so good for New York last season. And as a three-point shooter, that should terrify Kings fans considering their three-point defense. Dante DiVincenzo frightens me more than Julius Randle on Thursday.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, Dante is such a problematic defender too. Like, he does so much on the defensive end that can frustrate De'Aaron Fox. It can frustrate Malik Monk. It can frustrate Keon or Kevin, whoever else is out there. He's that type of defender, man. There's only a handful of players like him in the entire league. He is a good shooter. He was massive for New York last year. I think it's a great pickup. And if you believe all of the different reports, New York and Minnesota had been talking for a while. New York was reluctant to let Dante DiVincenzo go, and Minnesota wasn't interested in having a conversation that didn't involve Dante DiVincenzo. So I think the deal makes a lot of sense for Minnesota. And I not to be hot takey when the trade was announced, but I really thought Minnesota came out well in it. Like, you can't judge who won and lost the trade yet. Like, you can if you want to, and I know a lot of people do, but we won't know really till the end of this season, or until one of their team's season is over. I think both did obviously very well. Karl-Anthony Towns is the best player in the trade, but I thought what I thought what Minnesota got back was, I mean, for what they needed and what they want to do and for the steps they want to take, I thought it was picture perfect.
This just dawned on me, and I know this is Locked On Kings, but we're kind of diving deep into the Timberwolves here. Is part of the Dante DiVincenzo pickup, you think, maybe a counter to OKC's Alex Caruso pickup? Because I have to imagine the Wolves are looking. The West is really talented, period, but OKC was at the top, and I think OKC seems to be the consensus like #1 team in the Western Conference, or at least going into the season. I wonder how much the Wolves are looking at what OKC did, because OKC had a fantastic offseason too, in my opinion. Wonder how much they look at that and go, oh, they got a guy like that. We need to go out and get a guy like that now.
Yeah, I'm sure it was in the back of their head, but I think what they were ultimately thinking is the only way we can improve right now is trading Karl-Anthony Towns. And, we have some financial situations. I didn't think the team as constructed was a championship team. I was very uncertain about Minnesota going into this year. I feel much better about Minnesota going into this year after this trade. Again, it's not to knock Karl-Anthony Towns. I was just, sometimes stuff runs its course, and I wondered if in Minnesota, Cat's time had kind of run its course. There's nothing you could do about Rudy Gobert. Like, you can't trade him. Like, you're stuck. You went all in on that, and maybe, Cat's absence is going to help him. I doubt it, but still, you were kind of stuck there. Your only opportunity to get better was by trading Karl-Anthony Towns. So I think that's the #1 thing that they were looking at. But to your point, I think they were aware of what Oklahoma City was doing, and knowing that OKC, Denver, Minnesota, they were all kind of clumped in the same, spot. Everyone talks about, Oklahoma City, #1 seed, and, Denver fell off to the third. It was a separation of one game, and Denver doesn't lose to San Antonio the second to the last night of the season. It's a different conversation. It's different playoff matchups. Like, everything is very, very different if Denver doesn't lose that game. So the point is, all three of them are very good teams. Minnesota saw what Oklahoma City was doing, sure, and realized, you know what, we can't wait another year in an attempt to get better. We should try to get better right now. We probably maximized what we can do with Cat and this current group. We need to find a way to elevate, because pretty soon, aprons, tax penalties, things are going to start coming into play. And if we're not a championship team, and these are the decisions that I think all teams have to make now, if you're not a championship team, like legit a team that can win a championship, I don't think you're going to willingly pay those massive penalties that come along with being a second apron tax team.
And in true Western Conference fashion last season, the last 50-win team, which there were 5 of them, was the team that made it out of the West in the 5th seed in the Dallas Mavericks. So Wild West indeed. Well, D'Lo, getting back to the Kings, I remember a lot last season. there were so many times last season where I said it on the podcast, or I might have said it on your show, or just was thinking like, this is a game that could come back and haunt the Kings in the standings. And that was before I knew that the West was going to be as ridiculously packed as it was. Now I have the expectation going into the season that the West is going to be just a absolute cluster. And I would not be surprised at all if we get a scenario where 2 or 3 teams are right, like maybe the same exact win percentage, and the tiebreaker scenarios are just chaos. And that's what ends up working out the seedings. So I have this idea in my head that while the Kings can obviously survive getting off to a slow start, they did it 2 years ago when they started 0-4. It's not the end of the world. But I have a feeling that like early on, these early games, when you're taking on Minnesota and the Lakers, and you have some of these big matchups early on, like these are the times that you want to try and jump on these teams before they really start to ramp up. And if you don't, we might be looking back on these games come game 70, game 75, when the playoff picture is really starting to take shape, and going, ooh, that was an opportunity to get them before they really locked in. Am I putting too much narrative or like emotional context onto game 1 of the season between 2 hopefully very good teams in the Western Conference, between the Kings and T-Wolves?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I understand the line of thinking. Like, though, I understand the line of thinking. I mean, there's a possibility that we wonder, does Minnesota come out a little slow? Do they not get? Minnesota could come out firing on all cylinders. They could look like Oklahoma City did last year. Oklahoma City is one of the very few teams in the conference that didn't have a lull. Like, they didn't have like peaks and valleys. They were just kind of consistently good all year. There was no time to catch Oklahoma City. They were just good all year.
And healthy.
Yeah, right. And it's funny, no one talked about that last year, but the Nuggets, the Clippers had this like huge peak at one point where it was like, here we go.
Bad. Yeah, their start was bad too.
And then they went back down, right? They started slow, went up, went back down. Kings had like a 6-game winning streak where you're like, all right, here we go. Start to create something, get yourself back up there in the, top 4, top 5 conversation. We know that they went down. Denver, Dallas. Dallas wasn't even good the first half of the season. The team that represented the West was terrible until like the end of January.
Yeah.
So it's always you never know how teams are going to come out, right? I would love for Sacramento to be one of those teams that are just like Oklahoma City was, consistent all of last year. But the idea that game 1, and now if it's a, what was it, 143, 142 Milwaukee Bucks situation like last year where you miss free throws at the end of the game, Dame Lillard comes out and ends the game, sends you home. Like if that's the result Thursday night, Ant-Man hits a step away or something like that after, the Kings missed a couple of free throws. If you look back and you go, it's really a game the Kings should have won. Yeah. Game 70, 71, 72, you're going to feel a certain way about it. But barring that, I think it's like, all right, let's start the season. Let's see how this goes. And, you just move along. There will be games that we'll look back at some point, whether it's because of seeding, whether it's because, even if we're talking the difference between a 1 and 2 seed, or we're talking the difference between a 6 and 7, you always look back at certain games and go, man, you missed free throws here, lost to a bad team there. Like, that always happens. But building that into the conversation for game 1 is peak Matt George. Sure.
I'm proud of it. You know what? Peak Matt George. As Casey says, put it on a shirt. Peak Matt George. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NBA fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When you're watching the Kings and Timberwolves, or maybe you're watching opening night games tonight, and you have a hunch of how the game's going to go. You think maybe LeBron James tonight is going to have a really big quarter, or the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to beat the Lakers by this amount tonight. They're going to cover the spread. Whatever. In the same place that you place your bets, you can check out the latest stats, and view live play-by-play, and so much more. It's all right there in front of you, an easy-to-access system, so you have all the numbers plus the basketball IQ to make the most money. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Put $5 on anything. Put $5 on the T-Wolves to win tonight. Put $5 on the Kings to win the championship. Doesn't matter. Place $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets immediately, whether you win or you lose. It's all on FanDuel.com. Amongst the many things that I'm looking forward to on opening night, I am looking forward to peak Matt Georging myself and seeing the Sacramento Kings perform at a much higher level than they did during preseason, so I can go back to Twitter and take all my old panicky tweets and call myself an idiot for it. It's very clear that the Kings did not show us everything. And where I'm really hanging my hat, D-Lo, is you go back to game 1 of the preseason and how good the Kings looked in really the whole first half, but particularly in that first quarter. And they never looked like that again, really, in preseason. And I went back and I kind of watched the games a little bit. I'm not crazy. I'm going to rewatch every preseason game, but I watched like the starts of games. And one of the things I noticed is the way, even though it was kind of freelance, free form, like no sets, just kind of DHO and read and react offense, the Kings did not play the same way. The Kings starters did not play the same way. You saw less DHOs between Sabonis and DeRozan than we saw in that game 1. And there's like a number of theories to that. The first one is the Kings know that that worked. So why keep doing it? Try other things, experiment in other ways. 2 is maybe the Kings didn't want to put so much on film for the Timberwolves and other teams to have right away. They know, okay, this looks good. We don't need to show it anymore. What is it that I'm also of the belief too, like you shot 25 or something % from 3-point range during the preseason. The Kings will be better than that, but just because game 1 now matters doesn't mean the ball is just guaranteed to go into the basket more. So the shooting still concerns me a little bit. But what is it that you would most like to see on Thursday night to reassure any concerns that you have or anything, any way you might feel about how the Kings played in preseason?
Points. I want to see the offense look a little more efficient. I want to see the ball go through the basket. And you mentioned, because I felt like this too, like even in preseason, you're not running sets. Even in preseason, maybe you're not emotionally invested into the game. Maybe in preseason, you're just trying to get through it so you don't get hurt. Like, and those are all completely valid lines of thinking. I was like you, where it was like, so the ball's just going to go in now?
Yeah.
Like just because the game counts on the record. So because the one thing that you're doing in preseason, if again, whether you're emotionally invested, whether you're trying to avoid it, whether you just want to get to the game, whatever the case may be, you're still trying to make shots. Like even sets or not, you're still trying to make shots. So the idea that they're just going to start going in on Thursday, I always thought was a bit silly, but then I thought a little bit more about it, and it's the offense will be more dialed in. The movement on the offense will be different. Everybody's awareness will be different. So the likelihood of shots falling at a significantly greater clip than they did during the preseason, I think is very, very, very realistic. The one concern I do have, though, is the 3-point shot, simply because you mentioned that first game against Golden State, really that first half against Golden State, where the big dogs only played the first half and kind of turned things over to the other guys in the second. They didn't hit threes in that game. So whatever we think that they were doing with the offense, however beautifully it was moving, DHOs, all of these different things, they didn't hit threes in that one. And that caused me to question a little bit. I think it was, your memory is a little bit better than mine. I think it was like 68 points in that game. I think it might have been 68 to 66 at the half. And the Warriors had hit like this ridiculous amount of threes. I think they were plus 11 maybe at the half in threes and down 2. And it caused me to ask the question, is this the new version of the high-octane offense that we see from Sacramento, where they take advantage of the strengths of guys like DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk? We saw Keegan do some things over the course of those 2 games with the Golden State Warriors where he was a little bit more of an assertive playmaker. Like, is that the new version of Sacramento? We never saw the 3 drop the rest of the preseason. Do we see something where the Kings wind up scoring a lot of points and we go back to 80 style basketball where they're like an 80 version of the Denver Nuggets and they're out there scoring 120 points, but they're doing it primarily off of mid-range shots at the basket, Domas putbacks, things like that. Feels a little unrealistic in 2024, but that first game against the Warriors, that first half against the Warriors did cause me to ask that question.
I mean, and it's just how you look at it, glass half full, glass half empty, because I could look at it on one hand and say the Kings were generating a lot of good open threes, which we figured they would with this new look offense, and they just weren't falling. So that there's a belief amongst the Kings organization, the coaching staff, the practice facility, they're good looks. They're going to start going in. And we know Mike Brown's philosophy. You do not pass up an open three. You take that or you will get benched. Like Mike will pull you out of the game if you do not take an open three. That being said, kind of the glass half empty way of looking at it is if you were generating good looks then and not making them, how much better of looks are you going to generate now come opening night? Like, again, I expect to see different sets. I expect to see actually drawn up plays that we know Jay Triano's an offensive genius. He is the guy with the keys to the offense. We know he's a genius. So there's plenty of stuff, especially with his history with DeMar DeRozan. There's plenty of stuff that I know he's drawn up that we haven't seen yet. But the shot still has to go in the basket for any of that to matter.
Yeah.
So again, they're generating good looks and they're confident that they're going to go in. But what happens if they don't go in? Because you can't generate better looks than that unless Kevin Huerter just comes back and Trey Lyles just comes back, and their presence alone suddenly means more three-pointers are going to drop. I do think also, as much as I enjoyed Keegan attacking the basket, you mentioned like game 2 against Golden State, Keegan shot 8 free throws. He took 19 shots in that game. I love that for Keegan. And it makes me happy too to see the narrative of DeMar DeRozan taking shots away from Keegan Murray is as much of a farce as I knew it was when people started saying it to begin with. That being said,
that's probably one of the best things to come out of the preseason, by the way, not to interrupt you, was the fact that everyone got their shots.
100%. 100%. But I do feel that we're going to see not a regression or reverting back, but I think we will see more of a catch and shoot perimeter Keegan Murray primarily than we saw in preseason.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible, and that's up to Mike and Jay and the coaching staff to correct. It's up to De'Aaron and DeMar and Domas to correct as well. Now, obviously, he set, the rookie record for made three-pointers. Like, Keegan is a more than capable three-point shooter who probably doesn't get the attention he deserves on the offensive end because he's not the guy who walked into the team and had to be the #1 best player on the squad. He was the guy who walked in and was immediately like, hey, you're probably the 3rd best player. And at times last year, he was probably the 4th best player. And that's okay. But you still want him to get better at certain things. And we saw, and that's a lot of what preseason can be, is you're trying things out, right? You're trying to see how this works. You're trying to see how that works. And that's what Sacramento was doing. And you saw, okay, this is effective. When Keegan does this, we saw it in the second to last game of the season last year against the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
Everybody screaming, hey, to beat the Warriors, the only way we can with Malik out is Keegan is going to have to be more aggressive. Well, the playing game comes around, and that's exactly what he did. So he's shown that he can elevate, right? He's shown that he can take a step forward when someone goes down. Now he needs to take a step forward when everyone's there. He needs to be that guy, in my opinion, from that Golden State Warriors playing game. He needs to be the guy from the preseason. And if it does become one of those situations where he's camped out behind the line and he winds up becoming that catch and shoot three-point shooter, he could be very successful at that. But it's up to Mike and Jay and even De'Aaron and Domas and DeMar to remind him, hey, there are other scoring opportunities for you there. You have them. We've practiced this. We've run through this. There are other scoring opportunities for you there, and you need to take them.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. This is the app that you need to be using to get your tickets, period. Now, whether it's tickets to a Kings game, hey, you're looking for tickets to opening night on Thursday night, get them on Game Time. Or if you're looking for NFL tickets, any sporting event tickets, concert tickets, comedy show, theatrical production. If it's a ticketed event, more than likely Game Time has tickets for you, and they're going to be the best deal that you will find anywhere else because they have the Game Time lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find the same tickets for a lower price on a different site. Plus, their all-in pricing feature is unbeatable, right? It's so simple and yet so effective and so great for anybody who's bought tickets online who thinks they're paying a certain amount. Then you get to that last screen, right? The final checkout screen, and there's $20 or more in fees added on, and it feels like you're just getting robbed. Yeah, you don't get that on Game Time, right? The price you see up front is the price you are going to pay with the all-in pricing feature. Their seat views cannot be beat, as accurate as you can get, and their Game Time ticketing coverage is second to none. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So, D'Lo, who do you have guarding Anthony Edwards to start the game on Thursday night?
Oh man. I think Keegan. Oh, now I gotta run through everything. See, Rudy, Julius. Oh.
So what you're going through right now
Oh man, okay.
It's going to lead perfectly into the next conversation, or the kind of the next topic that I want to talk about, because that hesitation is exactly what I had, and it opens the door for something that we've kind of discussed, but not really. So I don't want to influence your decision. Let me know where you're going.
I don't. So does, if Keegan's on Ant, DeMar's on Julius?
Yes.
And then Domas is on Rudy?
Yes. And Fox is either Conley or McDaniels, whoever you want.
And then I assume Keon is on the. Oh man, that's tough. Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise you're putting Keegan on Julius, which is probably that's probably a way. Not a waste. Julius a good ball player. I don't think I want to do that. I think I'd go Keegan on Ant and lay it out the rest of the way we. Yeah, I think that's what I do. Keegan on Ant.
So I'm feeling the same way because
I think, by the way, I'm stealing this.
Absolutely, please do. And no, it's perfect because this question arose in my head from me stealing a conversation that you were having on ESPN 1320 with KC not too long ago, which is this concept of situational starters. And you and I are both on the same page because we hate this idea. Like it's just, I think inconsistencies in role and rotation lead to inconsistencies in play. And I don't think this Kings team can handle too many inconsistencies amongst their players, especially when one of the players in question is Kevin Huerter, who you need to get back to being a consistent player. Yeah. But I'm pretty confident with DeMar DeRozan's ability to handle guarding Julius Randle. I feel like he can handle that responsibility. Keegan is your best, I think, overall defender with size. So, yeah, you want to put him on Ant. The reason why this poses an interesting question, though, is if you have Keegan on Ant and feel like you can get away with having a smaller defender in DeRozan on Julius Randle, how necessary is Keon's defense in that starting unit? I don't think it's going to change, but that's where it opens the door to, hey, maybe this is a time where having Kevin Huerter's offense would be more beneficial for the starting unit. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. I don't think the Kings should change their lineup based off of matching up against other teams, but this is an idea where you're like, okay, I can go with maybe the more offensive route because Keegan can handle the primary defensive responsibility.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting conversation just because it's not something you see very often, if maybe ever.
Right.
And, you know, my thinking has always been in that regard is you want teams to adjust to you versus you adjusting to them, right? They need to figure out how they're going to deal with De'Aaron and Domas and the other four, you know, the other three starters. They need to figure all that out. But it doesn't feel like it kind of came from the idea that after that last game, I think it was LA. After that last game against the Clippers, I kind of had like I had like some feelings about Keon. Like I know Keon's good. I think Keon brings a lot to the team. I think he's a hell of a basketball player. But I also don't know that he did anything to earn, like, definitively.
Sure.
He's the guy. There's no question. And you can point to last year and the equity that he has, you know, from what he did last year. But let's also make note, this is not fair to him. But if I'm trying to make a point, the point I would make is the team wasn't good. when Keon walked into his biggest role of the year. Now that's, again, that's not Keon's fault.
Sure.
But if I was in a debate class and I was trying to win an argument, the argument I would make was Keon's defense, Keon's insertion into the starting lineup ultimately did nothing for Sacramento but lead them to the worst stretch of basketball they played last year and an early exit from the postseason. Again, please, that's not fair.
Sure.
But if I'm trying to win an argument, that's the argument I'm making. Malik was out. Kevin was out. And I know people just point to Malik, but losing Kevin was brutal. You wiped out your entire 2-guard depth chart in the span of a couple of days or a week or whatever it was. And so putting Keon in that position was really difficult. And I thought Keon was really good in the role that he was in. And I can't remember if it was Mike or Monty. I think it was Mike. But Mike said earlier, it might have been this preseason, might have been in the camp, about how, Keon outplayed his role. And it felt like, and this is me 100% interpreting tone, delivery, all of that stuff, between Monty at Summer League and Mike in preseason, I just got the feeling they didn't fully buy what Keon was doing. And as much as it felt like Mike was searching for Keon Ellis last year, the player that Keon Ellis became, I think when he finally found it, he was like, yeah. And we have no idea what Keon's true impact on this team is, because we certainly saw him play spurts when everybody was healthy, but nothing like what he did, towards the end of the season. He had gotten into the rotation. He was absolutely a rotational guy. He was important to what they were doing. But his role dramatically changed when when Kevin and Malik went down. So we have no idea what he means to this squad with everybody healthy. We're going to learn all of this together, whether his role is the starting 2-guard, which I do believe it will be on Thursday, or it winds up becoming something else. But we're going to see Keon's true impact on this team, perhaps for the very first time.
Mike is confusing in a number of ways. And it's probably a good thing that we don't fully understand an NBA level head coach, or we could probably all do the job to the same level that he can. That being said, because Mike was, last year, early on in the year, it was moving on from Kevin and giving Chris Duarte a couple of opportunities. Right. And now it's like, oh, but not Keon. Now Kevin, that's Kevin's spot if he comes back and he's ready. I'm always a little.
What's funny too is if you look back at Keon's game log last year, you'll find games where he played really well and then didn't play.
Right.
And I know there was two-way stuff. Like he wasn't like a full-time NBA guy. Like he was a Stockton. And so there was a sort of game management situation that they might have been playing through before figuring out, okay, we need to sign him to a different deal. But you can go back and you can look and you can see his stat line and remember his impact on that game, or remember the game in general, and go, oh, wow, he didn't play the next 3 games.
And Keon didn't capture Mike's attention through. It was fun. We were tracking like the Kings record when Keon started, and he didn't draw the attention from those. He drew the attention at the end of a blowout loss in Houston. Like that was where Mike noticed really Keon playing the way that he was supposed to play for the first time. Right. And that's kind of what launched Keon's opportunity. Well, like I'm trying to wrap my brain around the idea of like what has to happen between the last preseason game and Thursday to see Kevin Huerter in that starting lineup, because I don't expect it at all, but I don't think it's unheard of. And my biggest concern with that is not that I don't think Kevin can hold down the spot. It's not that you're removing Keon from the spot. It's the fact that we haven't seen Kevin for months.
Yeah.
We didn't see him at all during the preseason. He did not get into that final preseason game against the Clippers, which I don't understand why, unless he was just still not ready to go. And now he's just going to have a prominent role again. Like, I don't buy Kevin Huerter being ready for the starter spot on Thursday night.
I can't imagine it. I was with you. I thought for certain he was going to play in that game against the Clippers. I don't know. I always joke that Mike doesn't like Kevin. I'm only kind of joking. Like, I find like his demeanor about Kevin Huerter is just so bizarre. Like when he talks about Kevin Huerter, he speaks with absolutely no excitement about him potentially returning to the lineup. To me, Kevin Huerter being back healthy is a very big deal for the Sacramento Kings.
Sure.
Just as Trey Lyles returned to Sacramento is a very big deal for the Sacramento Kings. I'm with you. I don't see a situation. I'm hoping he plays on Thursday. I don't see a situation where he starts. That would stun me.
Well, I'll sneak kind of a two-parter here to wrap up in true poor journalistic fashion. Focusing on De'Aaron Fox. The first part is De'Aaron Fox started the season last year on an absolute tear, right? Offensively, he was averaging around 30 points per game. He was scoring with the best in the league last season. So the first part is, are you expecting or do you think the Kings need that kind of offensive explosion start from him? And the second part is De'Aaron Fox's name has been brought up a lot recently, not just because he's the star, but because of his comments about his contract situation in The Athletic. I felt a certain way about the comments. I did not actually get to hear your thoughts. I'm sure you and KC discussed it on the show, but what were your takeaways from what De'Aaron had to say about his Sacramento future?
So I'll start with that question and then go back to the what I expect of him this year. We actually didn't talk a ton about it, because I found it completely insignificant.
Yeah, okay.
This is I appreciate De'Aaron, and it's a clutch MO, and I think it's the way to go. Is to the team needs to prove themselves. Like I need to see this team continue to work and continue to do the things that they need to do to get better. But at the same time, this is dollars and cents, man. It's not complicated. We went over this. I think it was Tim Bontemps who was like, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they've got to trade Donovan Mitchell. They've got to do it right now. He won't sign the extension. Meanwhile, once you get to the offseason, Donovan Mitchell can sign a significantly more lucrative extension than he could have if he had signed it 6 months ago. It's as simple as money in the bank account. That's all this is. And if De'Aaron makes first team, boom, he signs. I mean, not that, De'Aaron, it's crazy. De'Aaron has certainly made life-changing money. De'Aaron makes all first team. He's making generational money for his children and his children's children. And I'm like, if I was an agent at Clutch Sports, that's how you play this. Like, it's very realistic for De'Aaron to be back into that all NBA mix. With that said, I don't think De'Aaron will ever be the player who plays for that type of stuff. Of course, he wants it. And while he downplays the recognition is important for reasons like this. It's $100 and some odd something million dollar difference between the contract he can sign if he makes all first team and the contract he can't sign if he doesn't make all first team. So I don't think he's going to try to do anything out of his game to get that right. So if the opportunity is there for him to score 30, he's going to do it. But the number one thing I think for De'Aaron Fox is the Sacramento Kings winning basketball games. The Sacramento Kings win basketball games, he's going to get the recognition he deserves. If he's averaging 22 or 23 and they're winning, that's going to go a lot further than averaging 28 and them not winning as much, because that's ultimately what happened last year. That's why he didn't get any all-star recognition. And it's ultimately why he was left off of the all NBA, the top 15, because the way the season progressed, he just kind of fell back a little bit. I think he's just going to do what's in the game. And if whatever leads to Sacramento Kings victories, that'll be good for him. That'll get him the recognition he deserves, even if the points are different. And it'll get him in a good spot at the end of the season for that contract. Of course, if he scores 30 and they win, even better. Well, which he's very capable of doing.
Make no mistake about it. I would love for the Sacramento Kings to have a stress-free blowout victory on opening night, but there is part of me that wants to see a close game, fourth quarter, Fox and DeRozan for real, and what that looks like, because that's going to be, I think that's going to be special. We got a taste of it, a little tiny taste of it in Utah, but again, that's not the full version of, I think, how dynamic that duo can be in the fourth quarter. So we'll have to wait and see. But Thursday, Kings and Timberwolves on opening night. This is not the last that you'll hear previewing that game. Check out Damien and Kenny, D-Lo and KC on ESPN 1320. You can find them from noon to 4 every single weekday. Every once in a while, I stop in as well when they'll let me in and send me a link. But I appreciate them so much. Appreciate you, D-Lo, for taking the time as usual. Excited to get another season going, my man. Let's do it.
Can't wait. It's a pleasure. We'll see you opening night.